The merchant Zeno, along with everyone else, underwent a shipwreck that led to the loss of all their belongings around 300 BC. Zeno's ship was wrecked as he was traveling from Phoenicia to Pyrrhus, thus being relocated to Cyprus. After reading the works of Socrates, Zeno decided to add his teachings as a Greek philosopher by practicing Stoicism. He taught that despair was common because many had given up on nature's uncontrollable factors, altering their existence. People accepted what is rather than imagining how everything could be different. When asked what his response to this happens to be, Zeno explains how losing everything he struggled for his entire life would outrage him. Most people snapped in anger. Thus, life betraying you is what he expects the majority to be angry about. To reword the first sentence, all of humanity, including Zeno, suffered everything being taken away after a shipwreck around 300 BC due to a loss of assets. Core values shaped by one's upbringing are best recalibrated with mental models whose corresponding frameworks remain unshifted. Contemplating a slight change could flip the entire philosophy, which drove the billionaire souls to go on focusing to lead. The philosophy which distinguished Zeno from the crowd was that the chances to exercise the mind, along with imagination, become a form of necessity. And life does not provide ample opportunities to apply it on. In other words, the entire practice enables an individual to withstand life, instead of how one would say you would practice in a biomedical model. Instead of worrying about misplaced valuables, in this case, Zeno attempting to be calm no matter where the winds of fate carried him. The phrase "spilt milk" encapsulates regret as a thought. It is common to picture Stoic people as hardened, bellicose individuals, able to keep in check anything that could remotely resemble rage and anxiety and not show extreme surges of any emotions. To be Stoic, perhaps, meant to look at life and everything around oneself in a far wider and deeper sense, which went beyond the most simplistic interpretation of being unfeeling. It indicates lack sympathy. One out of many concepts that are told to have survived for centuries. More than 2,000 years ago, millions of people believed and continue to believe now, but more in its advantages during adverse experiences. When comfort does not seem anywhere in sight, bleak perspectives take over, influencing the way one perceives life. Perspective is paramount for everything. Every single person reacts according to the events that have taken place in their life. Considering that the Stoics thronged in the public spaces to contemplate and expound their philosophy, their ideas acquired a degree of popularity. They practiced it, thought it had some convincing appeal, and did not see why that should be restricted to schools and courtrooms. Therefore, the entire social strata became aware of Stoicism from peasants to kings. Some of the most notable Stoics, Epictetus, whose name translates to "acquired as he was born a slave," the statesman Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, one of the most influential people in history, became the Roman emperor. Early Stoics would likely have never entertained what we think of as discrimination and did not practice differentiation of any kind. They quite literally created the new concept of world citizen or cosmopolitan. So now when we hear the word used in the context of cosmopolitan, we think of metropolises, New York, Toronto, Dubai, and London. It encapsulated the idea of how things ought to be, and the only cohesive unit those Stoics looked at was the all-encompassing togetherness perception. Stoic philosophy in general was quite patriarchal in character during the time frame. Although there might have been some references to women in the texts of Stoic philosophers. This is where the Stoics took this as disagreement. Musonius Rufus, teacher of Epictetus, argued that even when society scolded face, women were not just permitted, but incentivized to practice and learn Stoicism. But why did such an overwhelming number of people take up Stoicism as a living philosophy in such a chaotic world? The circumstances tend to skew one's view in one direction. One would say that the primary culprit for sadness for a lot of folks in the world is not the situation per se, but how entirely unexpected it is instead. Crops receive necessary nutrients, livestock drink, and the ecosystem gets chilled as a reward for rain, meaning their advantages across the board. In this context, without any shields such as umbrellas, things do not appear very pleasant. Why do we not cry every other day the rains come pouring down? There is a possibility that with time, it has become a part of everyday life. Even if there is an unpleasant feeling of annoyance sometimes when it's rainy and all we want is to see the shining sun again, we know deep down that we'll go back to normal eventually. Let's reflect on Stoicism. It tells us to prepare for a worst-case scenario and maintain some sense of contempt that there is something negative is going to happen. One of the principles of Stoicism states to plant yourself into a reality where everything around you is discomforting and try to adapt, which in this case might mean no blanket, showering with cold water, or eating only potatoes for a week. From these undertakings, we learn there are painful moments to endure, but with the right attitude, one can sustain the pressure, if not emerge stronger. Considering the barrage of marketing assaults we are hit with that fuels us into believing that more is required to attain joy, this lesson becomes relevant. It seems like we are after such things as money and material possessions. We spend a lot of time thinking how happiness can be attained through wealth or social standing. In contrasting theories, Stoicism postulates that the chances of one having an ever-happy moment cease to exist when they decide to seek it outside oneself, in things and situations. As such, Stoicism directs people to derive fulfillment from things within their control, such as principles, actions, or tastes. Happiness is about satisfaction. Remember what Seneca once said, "To restrict already to such a high degree is to give much room in one's life for what is important." Controlling and being controlled are concepts given intent within Stoicism, in which a person must be presented with these questions. What can I change? What can be changed? What can't be changed? What is out of question and not within my reach or intervention? And what is within? That was more elegantly put by Epictetus, where he states, "In matters in my power, I decide which. In matters out of my power, take no part in decision." Doing work in life is prime in the Stoic way. Stoicism is not about telling people to abandon plans and goals, but rather to create alternatives to be profoundly educated reality roadblocks. Victory, essentially, is never about gaining or achieving, but rather the fulfillment of goals through diligence and honor. Throughout history, Stoicism has emphasized the need to cultivate wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice, also referred to as the four cardinal virtues. It enables one to endure pain, control their emotions, and be just towards everyone around them. This is so because Stoicism has acted as a blueprint in the development of rational, emotive behavioral therapy and logotherapy in modern times. These therapies help individuals shift their perspectives to a more constructive outlook and even find meaning in the most challenging circumstances. Thus, by practicing Stoicism, we are prepared to weather life's tempests with poise. We can take pride in knowing that our ship may shatter, but we've lived on our terms. As Stoics remind us, every beginning has an ending, and that is perfectly acceptable.